everybody. This is Chuck Everson, and welcome to the Big East Rewind with my host, the famous Sonny Spera from Syracuse University. Sonny, how are you today?
I'm good. I'm famous now. I'm doing really good.
Well, listen, you're a legend in your own mind, Sonny. We all know that.
That's a beautiful thing.
It's a good thing we like each other, son, because this thing that we're doing has been so much fun, and we really had a good time cutting up with everybody. And you and I have rekindled a friendship that goes back a lot of years.
Yeah, absolutely, a lot of fun.
So today we got another good show today. Kind of a different perspective. We've got some managers, the backbone of the team, the guys that make the whole operation go. Because if they didn't do what they did, we couldn't get to play the games and do everything. These guys did everything from set the hotel stuff up and the travel reservations and meal money, the most important thing. And
ticket distribution at times.
Yeah, it wasn't like they were just out, mopping the floor when somebody fell or something. They did much, much more than that. And you're going to hear from two of the best in the Big East. From Syracuse University, Dave Siroty's with us, and also my good pal from the Villanova 85 team, Johnny Branca. John Branca's with us today. Welcome to the show, guys.
Thank you very much. It's an honor.
Listen, I've been waiting for this one. John comes to us today, Sonny,
a little bit of hype
from Arkansas by way of Trumbull, Connecticut. So John was a high school classmate of Harold Jensen. And
okay.
John, why don't you tell the story of how you got to Nova?
Yeah, I'm not even sitting here right now on the show if it's not for Jensen. So at the age of 5, I moved to Connecticut, immediately meet Harold. We're best friends from the age of 5 to right up to Nova. We play on every team, elementary, junior high, and then high school. We're on the same basketball team. So how I wind up at Villanova, Massimino shows up at one of our high school games. He's recruiting Jensen, but that's the true story. The story I tell is I had several schools recruiting me as a student manager. And I said to Rolly, listen, I know you need a freshman student manager for next year. I'll come if you take Jensen. So that was pretty much the story. I never really used it at our banquets or anything because I thought Coach Mass would be a little offended. But I think I'm going to start bringing it out. So that's the false story. But the true story is I clung to Jensen like a frog on a lily pad, and my parents made sure that happened. He almost went to a Catholic school for high school. They messed up the paperwork, but my parents, who had no money, were going to send me there just to make sure that I stayed near Jensen because he was a good influence on me. So we had a pretty decent high school team, went to the semifinals of the States our senior year, and that was it. We went to Nova together, roomed freshman and sophomore year.
Did Harold share with you after his Syracuse visit the great warm reception and welcome that I hosted him with, and then how Syracuse just came? It was not even in his radar anymore.
Well, I'll never forget that because the two of us were at his house. I even know where we were standing, like in front of his sink. I think we were just making steakums or something. And he was like, how much time am I going to get if Pearl Washington's the other guy that's being, and he had this all figured out that you guys were pretty stacked. And I think that was pretty much why the decision was made. And then he had a 5th recruiting visit that he didn't even take to UCLA. And that's when I knew that we were the odd couple. Because I would have been out there in a second, even though I'd already made up my mind. He is the straightest arrow. It was disgusting.
Yep.
All right, David, share with us a little bit of Syracuse. Tell us how you got involved in the managing in Syracuse.
Well, it started in high school, freshman year. Little guy, basketball. Go out for the freshman team with like half of Randolph High School. And my best friend is a guy named Tony McIntosh, who ended up being an All-American candidate at Fordham. So we're under the basket. Tony's supposed to cut in for a layup. I'm supposed to inbound the ball to him. He flares out to the corner. I throw it to the basket. The coach, Mr. Lasardi, calls me the stupid little Italian kid. Well, I was Jewish. So I'm like, what do? I'm being just destroyed here. Next day, I didn't feel well, so I said, I'm not going to make it. So I just didn't go. Tony then tells me there's a thing called a manager. I don't know what it is, but you get to practice and play every day. So I went and did it, fell in love with being with my friends every day, wrote a letter to Bernie Fine, who was our assistant coach at Syracuse, and said, I'd love to be a manager. And he said, great, give me a call when you get to school. Pulled in, shy little kid. I get put in the biggest party dorm in America in Flint, scared out of my mind. There's actually girls in there by room. It was too much for me. I told my dad, take me to Manley Fieldhouse. I'll go meet this guy, Bernie. He said, welcome aboard. And I was so happy. And for me, what was so amazing, even that very first day, going in Manley Fieldhouse, and down the other end were guys shooting. It was Leo Routens and Red Bruin and Eric Sandifer, who a few months ago I saw in the NIT finals on TV. Remember, we didn't have a lot of TV games. So it was just huge. And they're right in front of me as, you know, a young, quiet kid. I was like, wow, this is just awesome. And that was the beginning of spending like every waking moment under a giant marshmallow roof building in the Carry Dome.
So, John, tell us a little bit. Did you have to start as how did you get to were you the head manager? Did you start head manager? Talk about how you got into that, where you started and then where you got to.
Yeah, so Villanova had a pretty structured situation when it came to the managers and how you developed. So the first year, a lot of grunt work as a freshman. And like we were saying, when you first get there, you see these guys and they're like celebrities to you because you've seen them on TV. They're stud athletes. And, you know, a couple months later, you're family. And it's like, I don't care if you're Dwayne McClain or, you know, RC Massimino, whatever. So freshman year, a lot of grunt work. And then sophomore year, you actually spend a lot of your time working on the scores table. That's you know, specifically for games, but you're also learning more from the junior who's up ahead of you. You're teaching the person that's below you in terms of age. So sophomore year, I'd be at the scores table. That was a bad spot for me. I talked too much to the opposing coaches and the officials. I would reach over and hit the horn when the game was being played because a foul was called on the wrong guy from the previous play. Stuff that I just didn't care about the rules, but they let me stay there until Thompson I told him he was out of the coaching box, and he came up to me and said, who the F are you, an effing referee? And I slid out of that chair like that cartoon Liquid when you see it on TV. So that was, I managed to make it through sophomore year at the scores table. And then junior year, you're learning from the senior who has all those responsibilities of the meal money, the flights, the reservations, the meals. So that junior year, you're really you're holding on to that senior to learn what you're going to have to do that following year. So the toughest year is probably freshman year, but you're just excited to be there. So if it means, I left 7 jerseys on the court because we all rushed the court after a big win, you know, we get over it and we find those eventually, get yelled at, and you go home.
So you got to fill in a couple of those little. You dropped a couple of nuggets. I got to get a little more. Talk to me about some interactions. I'm sure Coach Boeheim was colorful because we played in the Palestra my 4 years, so that would have been overlapping by 2. Hated that place, by the way. Never won there. But talk about, you know, you don't have to pick on Coach Boeheim, but just talk about some other coach interactions because it's just fantastic.
We loved Boeheim. So the only time I ever had interaction with him was after I had graduated, and Coach Mass asked me if I would travel around with him and kind of enjoy the recruiting piece like over the summer. So we go to, I think we were looking at Billy Owens, and we go to this park, and Boeheim's sitting there on a swing set, and we sit down next to him, and Roley says something like, well, this was a time well spent. Owens is wearing orange sneakers out there. You really think we have a shot at him? So something like that would be funny. And then, you know, I had a tendency to be the jokester on the team, and I didn't care what would really happen to me because Massimino being Italian as I am, I think he allowed me to get away with more than most.
Yep.
So I had a tendency to not have my clothes on a lot of the time. And we were in the hotel after a big win. I think we had beaten Carolina. And I'm out in the hallway doing my thing, probably rapping or something. And the elevator opens and it's Dean Smith and his wife. So I just had the tighty whities. I was never a boxer guy. And I walked up to him, shook his hand and said, "Hey, tough game, but you guys have a good future ahead of you." And I just kind of turned around. He said, "Yeah, well, I'm going to tell Coach Mass that you're out here naked and just get back to your room." And I said, "No problem. Thank you very much. Big fan." I ended it with big fan. So, you're running the coaches all the time. And I had a tendency to aggravate a lot of them. And that made it fun too. Just one final story. And it's just that automatic sensation that comes over you when you hear a buzzer, either before the game starts or at halftime to get the second half going. You feel the need to fire that basketball from half court to the hoop. And at that point, it was Terry Holland was with Virginia at the time.
Yeah,
He was being interviewed by Musburger. The ball hit nothing but his head as he was being interviewed. And everybody that was near me got a tremendous laugh out of it. But I was thinking, he could be hurt. And I just kind of slid around everybody and sat down, but he was fine. But there's just some fun stories with coaches that I aggravated throughout the years.
Why? Again, you mentioned your relationship with Coach Mass. Let's talk about that for a second, okay? You did seem to get away with more than most, and he kept you around almost kind of like for the entertainment too. I mean, even right up
to recruiting.
Well, he took him recruiting, yeah. Even right up to the last days, when we all went and visited him, you were in full bloom in the locker room and stuff at that point. What do you think made him attracted to you and made you want to have you as part of his inner circle like that?
I think because it was just a piece of the team. Like the team had very good chemistry, and each person played a role. And I think my thing was I wasn't going to be the greatest manager ever, but I was going to make people laugh and kind of loosen up the group. So he loved the fact that I wasn't afraid to make fun of people that normally a guy that's 18, wouldn't make fun of, because they should show respect for these players and coaches. And instead, I was like ripping people. And he loved it the most when it was like the more stuffy person that I ripped. So if it was like one of our priests, he would love that. And if he missed like a pregame meal, I'd go upstairs to get him before the game, and he would say, "Hey, what'd you say about Father Laser today at the pregame meal?" And he just loved that stuff. So I felt like I could add that to the team, because I wasn't going to add a lot with the managerial position that was going to make a difference for the team overall. So it was
John,
fun.
It's because of that attitude I was able to make the All Big East first team.
Yeah.
Right. So Dave, tell us about your experience when you got there at Syracuse, and how you went up the ladder. Was it similar to what John's experience was?
No, we were nowhere near as organized as in any way, shape, or form. The Syracuse play was, this head manager was on scholarship and travel with the team. But in order to move up, you had to show desire. So we had a gentleman named Bob Gilbert who was forever at Syracuse. Gil was somebody who lived in Bayou up in New Haven and drove to Syracuse for every game, back and forth. He drove to every away game, back and forth, would not fly. None of us really knew Gil's relationship to the whole thing. It turned out he was at school with Coach Bam and Bernie. So he would come, and Gil had everything. Gum in every flavor you can imagine, striped, straight up, belts in every color, socks, tie, anything you could ever need was in his briefcase. So Gil would drive the games. So as long as you could arrange to get to the game, you kind of got points for showing up. The problem was, where do you sleep when you have no money as a student? So you go to your friend Sonny and Sean Cairns and say, can I sleep on the floor? So I stayed with them in their room. So then where do you get to eat? Again, you don't have money. You're in these Marriotts. Where are you going to go? So the players would give me some of their leftovers. And that's how I ate my freshman year and my sophomore year.
Yeah.
And then my junior year, I got to be head manager and was now flying and going to these places and being a part of it. But there were some funny trips, like driving with Gil and Sonny's dad from Syracuse to, was it Greensboro, Sonny, where we played North Carolina? Charlotte.
Played him in
And
Charlotte.
we get there after about 18 hours. Sonny's dad's in the front seat, and he's Mr. Spera to us. We're me and another friend are in the back seat. Gil had a buzzer in his car. If he hit 60, it got, so Sonny's dad, after the thing on, he's trying to sleep and wakes up and just starts screaming at Gil to turn that, beeper off. So we get pulling to Charlotte, and Magoo in the back, who was a fellow manager with me, we didn't know it, but we got some gum stuck on the seat. Gil would not let us out of his car after 18 hours almost straight without peeling every strip of gum off of that. And then I got the floor of like the Charlotte Marriott, beautiful fiber carpeting that I enjoyed tremendously.
He drove the Buick LeSabre. I'll never forget it. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was, I'm just listening to the stories, and there's so many things that come to mind. I remember the guys coming in the locker room and say, we just saw the most beautiful woman we've ever seen in our lives. And we're like, oh, sure. It was Vanessa Williams.
Mm-hmm.
And we were there the day Sonny walks in to the locker room and says, I just met my wife. What? I met the woman I'm going to marry. And sure enough, he was right.
She's going to watch this, Dave, so you might want to tone that down a little.
Oh, all right. Then there was another just classic, for me, it was classic introduction to college sports. We're in high school, and we have our team prayer that wasn't a real prayer. It was, whatever it was, you just repeat it and all in, let's go Rams, right? So I go to Syracuse, practice, first game against like Yugoslavia or somebody like Belgrade, one of those. And in comes Father Charles in the priest outfit, garb. What's it called, Sonny?
It's a collar, man.
The collar. And an orange sweater. The whole team comes in and they start doing the prayer. And I'm sitting there going, how do they know the prayer? So here's Sonny, his very first game in college. And I'm yanking on his warm-up. How do you know the prayer? It's like, what are you talking about? Sonny, how do you know the prayer? They go out for layup lines every time he comes by the bench. Sonny, where was the prayer? Where was the sheet? I don't have the sheet. And he's looking at me. We go back in. Sonny, where's the sheet? It took until midway through the game where he realized, how would a Jewish guy know the Lord's Prayer? I thought it was written down. They memorized. I didn't get it. That was my introduction to college basketball.
Missed the memo, baby.
Our Father, thou art in heaven.
You missed the memo.
Right,
That's okay.
All right.
I got to know.
All is forgiven. So, John, talk about now you're at Villanova and you get to practice. First of all, talk about the preseason stuff. The mile run and that type. I told Sonny a little bit about that, so he knows a little bit about the mile run, but not everybody does. So, talk about how we used to have to get in shape, the 6 o'clock workouts and things like that. Yeah.
And I actually had to take part in that when we would do the morning runs.
Right.
Those were, those were bearable. But the actual mile competition was a beautiful thing because you literally had every player's name on that list. And then there were odds next to it, like a horse race. And you'd have numbers that didn't even exist for like Chuck and Wyatt because they're huge and they have to run this mile. And I think that they wanted you to do like a 12-minute mile, which I thought wasn't.
I think it's 5:50 for bigs, and it was like 5:35 or something for.
I don't know, John. I think 12 minutes is right, John.
Yeah, 12. Because it was 12 minutes for me to become a captain of the soccer team in high school for 2 miles. So I took it, I cut it in half, and I thought it made sense for the big guys. But yeah, you'd have people, these wise guys that would come out of nowhere and be running next to the track with a calendar, flipping pages. And I mean, it just wasn't right. So Villanova hit every, back then, you don't have the resources you have now for fitness, but they checked every box that they needed to. I think that's why we won a lot of games. We were always in great shape. And then one year we decided to bring in a professional fitness guy, a strength trainer who was with, the Jets at that point. And he had everybody up at 5 a.m. telling us, hey, he only needs 20 minutes of sleep a day because he was a Green Beret or something. And then I think the classic story was, Steve Pinon, the walk-on brother John Pinon, he was the guy that would never make it all the way through. He'd stop in at the Dunkin' Donuts that we ran by, and then he would hitchhike back, and then we'd all wind up back there at the same time until, who was it, Chuck? One of the old players from back in the day picked him up.
I think Marty Karen picked him up and brought it back.
Yeah. And then that was one of my jobs, like not that necessarily for those runs, but at the practices, I would go up to Pinon and spray water on his chest. So it looked like he was sweating during the practices. And Massimino thought that he was working hard. So there was all kinds of weird things that happened that you had to, just go along with, because that's how we all became a team, trusted each other, and had great chemistry.
You pulled the Stanley Hudson from The Office.
Right.
Honey, we
All
had
right,
those
so
bricks, right?
We're just telling the truth here. So, Dave, if you want to share some things that we might have cut a few corners or had a few layup drills that we needed to get 120 and 4. And I think if we came up short, I think your life was threatened several times. So, go ahead, share that.
Yeah, every time Coach Bam or Bernie looked the other way, the clock just stopped seconds, or carrying those bricks around that you guys had to do the lane slides with the bricks, or the runs that were hilarious who'd get lapped. And for us, we'd be in Manley Fieldhouse. So you'd have basketball in the center surrounded by the track. So you had the track kids who just ran effortlessly. You'd have the wrestlers who just, all they did was ran. I don't think they ever wrestled. And then you'd have the basketball team that would run, and I'll be timing guys. And Bernie, I didn't know it, was also our assistant coach. He'd also time it. So if I was off, I'd get yelled at. It was hard to get away. We tried to get away with everything, but for me, the best part was when it was time to do the half-court offense and defense. That meant I could shoot at the other end with the other managers for hours. I could hit half-court shots all day back then. Step and shoot. That's all I did. That's all I did during practice was that. But it was it's weird, John. You see the managers now. There's like 15 of them.
Yeah.
They all want to go into coaching. Most of us just had a desire to be around basketball and create friendships and joys, and then to be a part of this unbelievable explosion of sports was amazing.
Now, I gotta ask you, Dave, right? And John, this is to both of you guys, because you guys had a network way before the internet, way before cell phones. I really don't know how you guys did it, but you had a incredible network of, I'm going to talk to my Villanova guy. He's going to get with my Providence guy, and then we're going to get this shirt from Pitt, and then I got these shirts in the Dome that we found that had Burger King written on them, and we're going to.
Don't tell the Burger King.
Talk about how you guys connected. How did that happen?
It's kind of like this unwritten rule that you pack extra stuff in the bag, and when you go to practice at the visiting school, you trade. So when trades happened, you now could sweeten the pot with if you got some good stuff. So if like a school like Lamar comes to the Dome, you could give them one Syracuse and they'll give you half the closet of Lamar basketball because they want Syracuse. So then you turn Lamar basketball shorts into a Villanova warm-up jersey. And you just keep going. It was great. I still have just Lamar had defense on the butt of the shorts. They were a trendsetter back then. I still have those. I got Boston College warm-up jersey. I've got our practice jersey. I've got there's a lot in the archives. Nothing with Syracuse though.
John, how'd that work for you? What did you guys do? How did that work out?
That is something I regret because I never got into that. But I swear I was like the guy that was probably scouting out the best clubs in the area, so that when we were leaving from the game that night, we knew where to go and how to get there. And I literally didn't do much with souvenirs. We had a guy that every time you turned around, he was taking a picture of something, and he had everybody's jersey and everybody's sneaker, and he was into that. I was not into that at all, which is kind of a regret. And when I was sometimes on the road, I would be buying Villanova stuff instead of opposing teams. So yeah, I was not that guy. But looking back on it, it was probably a big miss.
So one of the things Sonny was talking about, it's I guess the 35 years. Sonny, is that what's that thing? You can't get in trouble for 35 years.
Statute of limitations, man.
Statute of limitations.
You're good.
Burger King had a promotion for a football game, and our locker room was on the inside of the stand, so not directly under the, and the seats go up. So there was a closet under there, and that was our equipment closet. So one day we go in there, and there's thousands and thousands and thousands of Burger King Syracuse football shirts. And the idea was for the first 20,000 people who showed up for the game, you got a Burger King. No better. So that became part of our arsenal for trading. So we'd have teams come in and we had a stack of jerseys. We just put on the side. So we're throwing freebies in from Burger King to get good stuff. It was fantastic. Then you had schools that come in, and I figured out this whole game. So I volunteered to go work the practices for the visiting team, and I get stuff. And the only one that was bad was Georgetown, because that was in the Hoya paranoia days, and they didn't let the managers on the court. Most would let you be out there, remember, John? Except for when they went over their game stuff. Then they'd say, okay, go in. So Georgetown, you had to stay in the locker room. So one practice, they came and got me and says, Coach Thompson wants you. And I was like, what? Okay. So I go out and I see Patrick Ewing dunk. I'm like, okay, big deal. See there's a guy up there. Get him out of here. So I go halfway up the dome, the stands behind the basket, and it's a plant that's in the box. And I don't know why a plant was in there, but I came down and said, Coach, it's a plant. I can't kick it out. And I made the mistake of telling one of the reporters. So if you remember Eastern basketball back then, there was an article about John Thompson and Hoya Paranoia tried to kick a plant out of the carrier. That was me.
I will also say that those Syracuse football Burger King shirts came in handy when your clothes were, they hadn't been in the wash for a little bit. You just you got a fresh Syracuse football V-cut semi sweatshirt. It was pretty cool.
They were nice.
Thank you. Talk about the Big East tournament in particular. Some of the bus rides that we took and what would go on in the bus, and some of the stories that you remember about things that went on during that week at the Big East at the Essex House in New York City.
Yeah, the Big East was something we all look forward to, not necessarily for the right reasons, but it was the big city, it was the Big Apple, and we were going to make the most of it. So just going to and from games, didn't matter where we were, if it was New York or Hawaii, we were going to have that bus ride where people were rapping about each other, just nonstop crushing each other. And everybody had thick skin, I would say. And Plansky, maybe when he first got to Villanova, it took him a while to figure out that everybody was attacking everybody else. He was used to being, the king of Wakefield, but now he was at Villanova, so he took it a little rough the first year. But that was that was such a treat, the Big East tournament. We just had such a great time there, and I remember one of the games, me being myself and always wanted to go over the line a little bit for the laugh. I think I needed attention. I don't know why I did these things, but it was like
I'm glad you did, though.
yeah, it was. But some of them are very dangerous. So, Pinckney missed he wasn't there when we were getting prepped for one of the games. And I think it was Seton Hall we were playing. And I think it was Cormier might have been the coach that said, so what do you think as a team? Should Eddie not start because he missed the bus? Nobody says anything. And I yell out from the back, I said, there's no way he should start. We got rules here. And I see everybody with a shocked look on their face, except for Dwight Wilbur, who's laughing hysterically. And I'm like, thank God I got one guy to laugh, because I thought it was beautifully timed the way I said it.
You could have been lynched.
Sure enough, it was a game that was probably getting us into the semis or something. So Ed played his whatever it was, 30 minutes that game, but it was like nothing else, the Big East tournament, because you walked in that arena and it was a whole different feel. But then everything that surrounded you after and before the games was just you kind of felt like a movie star walking around in that place. And I will say that 35-year statute of limitations, I'm going to use it right now, because the managers had all those tickets. And if a team lost and you had all those tickets laying around, you went outside and you sold them, but you sold them at ticket price. You couldn't go over, you'd be in jail. So I was very honest with that. I sold them at face value.
Face value?
Yeah, and then we had a couple extra cocktails that night. So it was all fair, love and war. We hardworking guys. We deserved a little perk.
Sonny, jealous that
was the
Sonny, you jealous they took a bus?
Well, we always had we stayed at the Marriott in LaGuardia, and we took in 4 either Lincolns or Lincoln Town cars or your Cadillac, the large Cadillac.
Who drove yours?
It depended. It was either Boeheim, Bernie, Brendan Malone, or sometimes you got it, or Don Lowe, the trainer. So
here I am, the first time I ever drive in New York City. Big East tournament, Lincoln Continental with 3 players. This was before the seats rise. So when you're 5'4" and there are no telephone books, I literally am looking through the windshield wiper or through
the steering wheel.
It's 2 knuckles.
Driving, petrified. Now that was after we had driven from Chicago to Marquette in Milwaukee in a rental car, Lincoln Continental, with no windshield wiper fluid, in a snowstorm with, all the crap coming on the windshield. And George Papadakis is in the front, a 7-footer, reaching out to wipe off so I could see through the steering wheel. Those were really fun, exciting times.
It was very safe. It was very safe.
Yes. The story in New York.
My first experience, we were on the bubble my freshman year, and we wound up getting in, and Milwaukee was the site for the first round. Yep. And I was like, this has got to be the worst place you could have. I'm a freshman. I'm so excited to just be out of my house in Connecticut. And I never traveled. Our family didn't travel much. Jersey Shore was about the distance we'd make. But the Milwaukee trip, there's nothing there except really cheap beer. And we won, I think, the first game, lost the second. But it was exciting to just be there because it was the NCAA tournament. And you're thinking, as an 18-year-old kid that couldn't play Division I, wow, I'm a part of this. And I going back to that last topic, I think that's the reason that I even was allowed to go to that game was because Massimino had that Italian thing going with me, and he knew that I'd act like an idiot and keep people loose for a few hours. So that was just a great trip, even though it was a terrible town. And I think the guys were didn't they get in trouble for jaywalking or
Yeah,
something?
me and Gary almost got arrested for jaywalking, and
Yeah, that's
I
terrible.
didn't even know what jaywalking was. I'm in Long Island. I'm not a city guy. So Gary and I, we're looking both ways. There's no cars for blocks. We start walking across the street, and a cop car stops to a screeching halt like 4 blocks up. He comes sprinting down the block and hold it, and the whistle's blowing. He goes, what do you think you're doing? I go, we just crossed the street. What are you talking about? He goes, that in these parts, that's called jaywalking. Where are you from? We said New York. He goes, do they do that in New York? I said every day.
Every day, all day.
What are you talking about? So, all right, let this be a lesson to you. You know, and he let us off with a warning. I look at Gary and go, do you believe this guy? What's he talking about?
So would you guys say that 1984, I know it seems like forever ago.
Yeah.
Earl's freshman year, the 4 semifinals were you, Syracuse, Georgetown, and St. John's. Was there a more electric environment that you've ever been in your life than the Garden that day?
No, listen, those games were wars, and everybody came out for those games, you know, and especially those 4 particular teams you just mentioned, and it was exciting to say the least. That's for sure.
And if it wasn't for colors, you couldn't tell who was rooting for who, because
Right.
the arena was just like, it wasn't.
Yeah.
This is your side. It was just everywhere, and probably because some of the managers were selling tickets outside. I don't know, but you had such a blend. It was really cool. That was really cool.
I just realized that, you know, just thinking about it, the Big East, our freshman year was in
Hartford. Mm-hmm.
Second year, when we're all sophomores, it goes to the Garden.
Yep.
The 2 years, the semifinals were Georgetown, Syracuse, Villanova, and St. John's.
Both years?
And it took, can you imagine not having those 4 in the semis in the early years that attracted sellouts and the energy? It was just unbelievable.
Well, look at the 4 coaches, right? Thompson, Massimino, Carnesecca, and Boeheim. Our Italians are represented well, John, and that's some serious. I would love to know the combined number of wins amongst those people, and every single one of them should be in the Hall of Fame. I know Coach Mass isn't, but he should be. That is just a phenomenal collection of brain power. I think.
Yeah, incredible. And if you look at it, you know, the top guys, which I would say is the Mount Rushmore of the Big East that time, with Pinckney, Chris, Patrick, and Pearl.
Mm-hmm.
You know, at that particular time, those 4 coaches and those 4 particular players.
That's true.
It was amazing.
As good as it gets, you know.
It's almost like the NBA, right? The NBA advertises their top player, and that's the matchup. They could have done the same thing with the Big East. It would have been huge.
Absolutely.
So I forget what year it was, but we were playing, I think it was the afternoon session in the Garden, and Coach Boeheim gave me the wrong tickets. So he would have given me the night tickets. So we get word that all the families are outside in the concourse and the game's about to start. I don't know any better, so I go to the guy who's in charge of the Big East and say, hey, Mr. Gavitt, we got a problem. Can you help? Lo and behold, he helped me, and Michael Tranghese helped me, and they got to know me because of that screw up. And I then get an internship after postgraduate internship with the Big East because Coach Boeheim called them. They remembered me, and I got it. Then from the Big East, I go to Seton Hall, and now I'm with the Clown Prince of coaches. I'm with PJ, which was such a different model for me than what I was used to at Syracuse. Very, very different. So I got to see this whole thing from the Big East, from behind the scenes as a manager, then internship, and then working in sports information at Seton Hall, and then seeing in '86 all my friends. Remember Sonny? They were Walter Berry block away, so they put the block, and then Dick Papero screwed us by not throwing Michael Graham out of that game. Still cost us a championship watch.
It's good to see Dave got over it, don't you think?
You're right.
Yeah,
Isn't that nice? Isn't that nice
still
that
angry about it.
he's not holding on to that. He's not holding on to that like that.
Not at all.
And he picks on one of the best officials out of the group.
Yeah,
Exactly.
it's Froggy, baby. Froggy from Liverpool, who
Yeah.
has told us he's going to be on. So I
Yeah,
can't wait for that
Froggy
one too.
Awesome.
Sonny, you got to ask him about causing you not getting a watch. See what he said.
Oh no, we'll have the camera because we had Andre on too, and Andre referenced the moment as well. So
He lost the watch also.
see how Dave is so wrapped up in gear. He's still thinking he didn't care about winning, but we would have got this watch.
Nothing wrong with that.
The watch.
Good guy.
It's all the gift.
This was
Look
Larry
at Chuck's.
Harper. I
Look
love
at Chuck's room. He did all right with
I
gear.
did all right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So John, let's move on. Talk about the relationship that you guys have, meaning you, Rob Wilson, Vic, and John Lindblad, and Neil, the guys that were the managers for that '85 team. Talk about the relationship you have with that group of guys, and talk about going through the tournament in '85.
Yeah, it was such a diverse group in that Vic DeScenzo was the senior. So he was a semi-serious guy, but could also have a good laugh. And then Stats, Rob Wilson, he was very serious, but if you got him at the right time, you could laugh with him a little bit. I was just bananas. I would go on trips with just wearing a suit and carrying that little bathroom bag that you needed for brushing your teeth and shaving, and that was it. And then we had two freshmen, Neil and John Lindblad, right?
Yeah.
So those two guys were kind of different. Neil is just an incredible guy, but he looked like something out of a I don't know, the 10 Commandments movie. He's got this huge gray head of hair. We called him Methuselah because he was 18, but he looked like he was 81. And he was just laughing all the time, always happy. And then the other kid, he just seemed to get on everybody's nerves, but we all loved him because he's part of the team. And whenever he needed a photo, he's there snapping a photo. But we all leaned on each other, which was nice. So no matter which, piece of the pie it was for the team, everybody leaned on each other. And we did that as a group. Players did that as a group. Trainers and the players, the coaches and the trainers. It was like everybody had somebody to go to at all times, and that's what was kind of cool about it.
And to this day, you guys are considered part of the team, just as if you played in the games.
Yeah.
It wasn't like some teams you might hear that, okay, this guy's just a manager, we don't need him. He's just. But really, when I said at the beginning of the show, really, you guys are what made the whole thing go. If you didn't do what you guys were supposed to do, we couldn't have played and did what we did.
Yeah, and I was bummed out my senior year because we brought on one more guy, or Wyatt was a fifth-year senior. I was going to start the game as a player. Coach Mass agreed to it, but we had 5 seniors that year playing, so I kind of got stiff. But that would have been cool. And then the other screw up that you guys were talking about screw ups before, my favorite one was we were in Virginia, I think, when the spaghetti and the steaks showed up for breakfast, and Coach Mass is like, what the hell? And he's going crazy because he probably was out with his friends the night before. He's not on much sleep, so he's extra aggravated. And I just immediately start throwing people under the bus, which included Joan McGuckin mainly. And I went running out of the dining room to say, I got to call McGuckin. And that's how I left it. And then when I got back to the school, I went up to Joan McGuckin and I said, hey, I had to tell Coach Mass that you're the reason the meal was wrong. And she was like, I wouldn't doubt it. She walks away. So you got to do some things just to save your ass. And that's what I had to do that day. But hey, it was a great trip. I think we lost, but it was a beautiful campus, Virginia.
Yeah, Virginia's nice.
Yeah.
Talk about going through the tournament though, John. In '85 when we started out in Dayton and then Michigan, and Talk about what that was like with those guys.
Well, with the managers was fun, but with the cheerleading coach, I think was even better. So I'm not going to cross the line with that because he told me not to. But a lot of friends on the cheerleading team, and then the going from place to place and just seeing all these players that are like studs, and we're going through these teams, and you're talking, we start off with Dayton where we barely win.
Yeah.
And then we play Michigan, who's like incredible. And, Jensen's now doing things that he was never doing before. And his whole freshman year, by the way, he was terrified because everybody just kept telling him to relax. And that's why he was always nervous. And then his sophomore year, he's loose and he turns into the MVP. So then we wind up playing Maryland. That's when Lenny Bias gave me the finger on national TV. That was fun. I mean, he dunked on somebody and then was rude to him, and I took offense to that because that was one of my teammates. And he gave me the middle finger as he ran by, and I thought that was really weird to do because he could have been caught on national TV. So then after we played them, we played North Carolina, and they didn't have Jordan at that point. I think he had left a year earlier.
He did, yeah.
And,
Brad Doherty.
I'm glad people keep that low because, I'm still pretty sure we would have won the game. But without Jordan, there was nice. And then when you get to the Final Four, you don't even realize you're there. Chuck, as a player, it's probably no different. But for a manager, I feel like I'm in a dream. I don't remember any of it, to be honest with you, except for the AD telling me I shouldn't run onto the court. Another huge mistake. And I think the only other thing I remember is not getting a video or a photo of shaking President Reagan's hand, my all-time favorite president. But as far as the managers went, we stuck together more during the run than any other time because it was such an important piece of our basketball lives. We were making sure everything was buttoned up because we weren't going to be the guys that caused any issues during. And as a manager, I don't know if this happened with you, Dave, but there's only so many seats on the bench. And as you go farther and farther into the season, those seats start disappearing. And I don't mean that there's less seats. I mean that there's more people that you haven't seen before in your life that are sitting on those seats. And you just want to go up to Massimino and say, I busted my ass to get to this point. Am I going to have to sit like 3 rows back? I said, I don't mind sitting with my parents. They probably spent their last dime to travel to Lexington. But I was kind of hoping I was going to be sitting there on national TV doing my thing every time Dwayne McClain dunked. But instead, I was back there 3 rows. And I think only the senior manager was allowed to sit on the bench. There was a couple of priests. You had to like put a mirror under their nose to make sure they were breathing, but they got to sit right there and they weren't even cheering for the game. So that's my aggravation story for the.
So our bench story was we could expand up to essentially 3 rows, probably 18 seats from scorer's table to be on the baseline. So my responsibility was who sits where. So you go 18 times 3. You had like 54 people on the Syracuse bench. So it wasn't
True
even
story.
So we got to move up, and then my seat, when you get to the head manager, it was me, Bernie, Coach Bam. So I can't tell you how many pictures my dad has off TV where he took, it says Jim Boeheim and it's me. I was right there. And some of the famous pictures, I'm right there. But you're right. When you went on the road, the head manager got to sit on the bench. You desperately didn't want to do the scorebook because that was who didn't want to do. I want to be on the bench.
Yeah.
So my buddy Magoo, I always lobbied to get him when he traveled. He could sit on the bench, but it was harder and harder. As you're right, as you went, especially from 54 down to 16 or 17 or 18.
Yeah.
So Dave,
but, for me, it was fun being the guy with the towel in front of 32,000, and I was convinced they all came to see me.
Dave, talk about some of the journeys that we had in those rent-a-cars when we had that free time in the afternoon, when all of a sudden we wanted to, drive to Notre Dame campus or let's go visit downtown Boston. And at that time I think they had started the Big Dig, but we would park it wherever we wanted. We didn't care about any parking tickets. We'd park it up on the curb. We would go down to Faneuil Hall and then we would buzz around the Beltway in DC. And a few times we had the cheerleaders with us. Do you want to expand on any of that? You can.
Again, it was my car, right? So I could do whatever I wanted. So any time off, we would just time to go sightseeing. So Notre Dame, Sonny's wife and girlfriend was Angela. Who knew that Notre Dame is off Angela Boulevard? So here Sonny's on the hood of the car going up on this street sign so that we could take a picture of him. The thing I also remember about Notre Dame, it's one of those NBC games with Dick Enberg, one of those games of the week. You can hear the music.
David Rivers versus Pearl.
Right? What was it?
David Rivers versus Pearl was a big deal.
Right. So what was more important to me was the leprechaun, and the orange. And I bring the orange and the leprechaun into the locker room. The locker room's literally right off the court. So here we're taking pictures with the orange and the leprechaun. And here comes Coach Boeheim, and you can imagine how that went. Then I remember the Supreme Court we went and saw in DC with some of the cheerleaders. We would
remember riding partly on the shoulder and partly on the road, and a couple people thought they were going to die.
Yeah, I was not a good driver. But it wasn't my skills, it was the car. It just wasn't.
Couldn't have been your vision, right? Through the
for my size. Yeah, it was a problem. It just was unfair. And I think that's why they brought about the electric seats was for me. And then at the Big East tournament, some of the funny things, there was just so many things that even before the Big East, what John, you're trying to ham it up, I was doing along with the managers. Remember those CBS sports signs and the ESPN signs?
Yeah.
I was doing deals with those production guys. So I've got one down in our basement. I think Sonny, Raphael, Wendell, you probably all have them. Because
I got one signed by Brent Musburger and Billy Packer.
Yeah. The minute the game ended, I had CBS and ESPN production people running to get their signs because they knew they were getting Syracuse stuff from me. So I had a collection, I'm doling them out. Then the other funny thing that would happen was game days with tickets. Because, John, did you get a stack from Coach Mass that you doled out to the players?
Yeah.
In the envelopes? So if they were good to me, I would take care of them. And I'd hook them up. So not every ticket with the player was in the same section. So if you kind of ticked me off, I don't care who you were going second level, somewhere in the upper deck. If you were good to me, I took care of you. There's a lot of 11 a.m. lobbying that went on before the 4 o'clock games back in the day at training table.
You ate much better those years. You weren't eating scraps and you weren't sleeping on carpets.
It was a lot better with training table.
We learned how that went.
Chuck, who got involved a lot with Villanova's tickets?
Lee Donor.
Yeah.
And she's still around. God, you know.
Really?
Yeah, she's I don't know how old she is, but she's up there, and her daughter is her caretaker. So I've seen her at a couple of events over the years. So as far as I know, she's still doing that. Yeah.
Wow. So she needs a donor.
Yeah. So the best part of what you guys did, though, you're talking about tickets, was handing out meal money as we got on the bus to go to.
That was a big deal.
To go wherever we would. Listen, Sonny, we would be in the huddle before we broke huddle. Even at Lexington, and it was 1, 2, 3 meal money, and then we went on to the court. Because we didn't want to lose because we wanted another envelope for the next day,
Because you got more in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, we did. And at the Garden in New York.
And Coach Bass would prorate stuff too, because if you're in Hawaii or Alaska, stuff's more expensive. But the the greatest move he ever pulled was my senior year. We didn't make the NCAA tournament, so we played NIT game on campus. No students are on campus. It's like spring break. The cafeteria is open, and he goes to Mulligan and says, "Yeah, they're going to need 75 a day." And so I walk up to Mulligan with the sheet that shows 30 or 40 times 75 per day, and Mulligan's like, "Can you explain why this is happening when there's a cafeteria open?" And so I said, I can't explain it, but I'll go get Coach Mass. He's like, "Don't bother." And all of a sudden, I'm handing out this money, and these guys are like, "Holy cow, this is heaven!"
Yeah.
And then we lost. And then we lost.
You were on the bus ride with us. We went to the Big East 1 year, and the only two guys that were awake were Dwayne McClain, myself, and John Lindblad, who you referred to earlier. And John thought he was very good at backgammon, AC Deucey. That was the stuff we used to play on the bus. I've never played it before or since, but my 4 years at Villanova, I got pretty good. And Dwayne would look at me and say, "Well, I only play for money." And John was like, my grandfather taught me this game. I'm really good. So they're playing whatever it was, $1 a hand, $2, whatever it was. And Dwayne would say, "I need double fours," and boom, it would happen. Like I thought the dice was loaded, and he's looking at me with that look like this guy don't know what he's in for. And I'm watching this, and we roll up to the Essex house, and John hands him the whole envelope. And Dwayne says, Dwayne goes, "Listen, we're going to New York City. I can't leave you empty-handed. Here you go." And he rolls off 5 ones and gives him a 5 spot and says, "Have a good trip, John."
He's a generous man.
The generous
Sonny,
man.
do you remember in Atlanta with the NCAA tournament? We were in that really nice hotel.
You mean Atlanta playing Georgia Tech in the Sweet 16 on their friggin' home floor? Yeah. I remember. Yeah.
Yep.
John Sally, Mark Price. Yeah.
It's a beautiful hotel.
And Indiana's playing North Carolina in the other game. But go ahead.
Yep. So we go in, and Ronnie Cycli thinks it's the deep south. So from Syracuse, it's March in Atlanta. So at most it was 48 degrees, but Ronnie was insistent he's going to wear shorts and a tank top and get a suntan in the park. So we get to this really nice hotel, and the coach band brings us together and says, "All right, we're going to eat in here in this beautiful restaurant." It had to be like 10 stars. These guys, the players, half of them are like, "Okay." The other half are like, "No, we want meal money." Because when we first got there, they went and scouted and found a McDonald's down the street, and they wore their Syracuse basketball sweatshirts. So they already befriended the kids at the counter. So whoever it was, I don't remember who it was, but they had already worked deals. So they said, "Coach, we'll just take the money instead, and we'll go out on our own." So the dummies that took the nice food, we didn't get paid. We didn't get the money. The other guys did, and they're eating for free. But then I got back at them 1 year during over break. We got money because the cafeteria was closed. At the same time, I found an empty or a box of Snickers bars up in an unlocked cabinet with a concession stand at the Dome. So I took the box of the 24-ounce Snicker bars back to our apartment, and we used our meal money to go buy stuff. And we ate Snickers bars.
Oh, God.
And we'd wait for a team meal that was better than Snickers bars. And we were happy as could be.
We also get to Atlanta, and we find out through, this is our senior year, so Leo Routens, who's in the NBA at this point, playing with the Sixers, says, "Listen, you guys got to go to this special shoe store."
Oh, yeah.
Special shoe store. So we get a drive. We go, you know what I'm talking about, right? Check the
Friedman shoes, man.
Friedman shoes. We go in the shoe store, and of course, I'm looking at a pair of the guys like, "Yeah, Magic Johnson was trying those on the other day." So I'm like, "Magic, right? I got to buy these." What a sucker. I was like, and my meal money was buying shoes for my feet. I don't think I wore maybe twice in my life.
Massimino lived in that place. He was a big shoe guy, and he would come out of there. He couldn't hold them all. Like all the guys would have to help him carry the shoes out, and he would help the guys pick out the shoes that they could afford that was best for them with whatever kind of suit they had. You know,
And you came in an alleyway, and you think like you're going to like a gas chamber, and then you're upstairs, and like there's
you got
shoes.
the best shoes.
Right, there's just shoe boxes everywhere. You barely have room to sit, and I just remember, you know, anything the guy told me, oh, Magic, oh, really, yeah. Moses Malone was there checking these out. Moses, all right, like, you know, I was like, you know, kid from Binghamton, I'm like, yeah, count me in, Magic, I'm in, you know. So
We love the Syracuse trips though because they were, you know, it was the Dome, which was exciting, but then there's also the couple of, what was it, Bugsy's?
Yeah,
place right
Bugsy's
there.
and Fagans right across the
It's
street.
amazing. I can't remember what happened yesterday, but I remember the name of that place, just talking about it now. And then we'd always have the 5:30, you know, the flight the next morning.
The next
Yes.
morning,
So
yeah.
Jensen, it depended who you roomed with, but Jensen and I, we didn't room on the road. We just roomed together at school. But for some reason, we would wind up in the same room at those trips because we just wouldn't go to bed. We figured it doesn't make any sense to go to sleep. So we would just stay up through the night and then get to the bus, to the airport. And there's that it seemed like one city, once a year, twice a year, Coach Mass, I'd have to go to his room, get him out of there. His hair would be everywhere. He looked like Heat Miser. And then he'd come onto the bus, like a huge jar of peppers. And we're like, where could you possibly get this 2-gallon, whatever it was, 5-gallon jar of peppers? And then just sit down on the bus and the hat down over the eyes and let's go. Everybody on here. And then we'd move. And it was like just the most amazing adventure going up to the Cuse. We loved it.
All right,
Chuck,
I got. Go ahead, Dave.
Chuck, you know Wendell Alexis. And
Sure.
Wendell was my roommate on the road our senior year. And Wendell, remember back then we didn't have cell phones, so it was the hotel room phone. Wendell would never answer the phone. It didn't matter if I was in the shower, what I was doing, sound asleep, he would never answer the phone because he didn't want to talk to Coach Bayheim or Bernie or any of the assistant coaches. And he said, it's for you. And he would get me out of the shower, phone's ringing, and I'd have to go. And then it invariably was Coach Bayheim come to the room, and I'd get yelled at for something I did and come back to the room like this. Wendell, why couldn't you have protected me? Because I ain't answering the phone. And it was friendships, and we made fun of each other all the time, and the joy, like, look at this all these years later. Sorry, what were you gonna say?
No, I want to ask you guys one final question, kind of try to wrap things up here. I would like you guys to give me what was your one favorite memory of your time at school. Could be on the court, off the court. You know, just share with us that one special memory that you have. John, why don't you go first?
It had to be the whole night of the North Carolina win, because that put us into the Final Four. And it was all the way from storming the court and, you know, hearing like Wyatt Maker screaming in pain because I'm on his shoulders, to getting back to the hotel and everybody mobbing the bus, to getting back to Villanova and seeing the campus a mess, and then having a guy that knew us on the main line open his bar, even though it was like 2 a.m. and me and just a couple of guys went in there and just soaked it all in. And just, I can remember like every ounce of that versus some other games or some other tournaments, not necessarily, but that one stands out in my mind. The North Carolina game where we were, I mean, I can't speak for the players, but just sitting there, you're seeing this, another team filled with studs, and you're just amazed that we sucked it up, played great defense, and won it like 56-44, whatever it was, and got the hell out of there and looked forward to the Final Four after that.
How about you, Dave?
There's so many of them because it really defined who I was. And, you know, Sonny, you know, I still don't know the weather, the climate in Syracuse because it was always 72 in the dome. And I would be in there, fire drills, crossing my dorm across the street, I would just go and sleep in the locker room. So I lived and breathed Syracuse basketball, and it changed me as a person with the friends I have today and in and out of college sports. I think the one that probably quite a few people would say at Syracuse would be Pearl's half-court shot. That it was just unbelievable to beat Boston College at the buzzer. The entire 32,000 people are going crazy on the court, and Pearl sprints in the locker room. And here you had this entire jubilation of a city, and we were together in the locker room, just us. And then when we left, you could either go back to your apartment and pretend like nothing happened, or we would go down to Marshall Street. And I didn't think I was famous, but everybody was so excited of what just occurred. And you just really felt like you were part of something that was just so big and powerful and joyful. And so that I just remember it just vividly, as well as so many other great memories. And, you know, that was a miracle shot by a miracle guy.
That's a great place.
That's a perfect way to end this
That's
episode.
a great spot.
I got to tell you, that was the most fun I think we've had doing one of these shows, and we've done probably 12 or 13 of them. So John Branca and Dave Siroty, thank you very, very much for being on. And thank you for all the work and hard work and effort and that you gave supporting us when we played, and the teams that you worked with. Like I said several times during the show, that nothing happens without you guys. Everybody's job is just as important as everybody else's, and appreciate all the efforts and all the laughs and all the everything that you did to help us be able to get on the court and play the games. So thanks for being here.
35 years later, thanks for keeping the 17 guys on that text group as one on a daily basis. We love you for that. Thank you.
You got
it. You know what? Also, I hope that I echo Chuck's sentiments, but also if we have a 2-hour practice, I know you guys are there an hour early, and I know you're there an hour late. So that's 4 hours plus almost every day.
And schoolwork and everything else that way.
Yeah, and the basketball season goes forever. Like, it goes through every break you have. It has spring break, it has Thanksgiving break, it has Christmas break. And, you know, so life is a basketball. So you guys truly, absolutely are every bit a part of everything we've ever done, and a big reason for what we did. So thank you guys from the bottom of my heart and for my team.
Just protect us if we get sued by Burger King.
It's all good, man. It's all good. We have plenty of people. We have plenty of people on staff here at the Big East Rewind that will represent you.
That's right. Well, as Sonny just said, you've been listening to the Big East Rewind with Sonny Spera and myself, Chuck Everson. The show has been brought to you by our fine staff, the director and producer, Daryl Gurney and Nick Chico Corvus. You can check us out on YouTube, and please hit subscribe when you go on the YouTube channel. We're on Spotify and iTunes and wherever else you get your podcasts. And if you have any comments, suggestions, or anything that we can do better, or anything that has to do with the show, you can reach us at bigeastrewind@gmail.com. Thanks again for being here. This has been the Big East Rewind. Everybody have a nice day. Bye-bye.
Peace out.